Good afternoon. I want to begin by offering an overwhelming word of thanks. Thanks to all of you who, despite the cold and the rain and the forecast today, have gathered as a living witness to the sanctity of human life. But we also give our greatest thanks to Almighty God. It is He who knit each of us together in our mother's womb, who saw each of us from eternity and the life that we would live. And He indeed saw this day. He smiles with delight upon our event, and He blesses us. It's an honor and a privilege to address all of you here at the Charlotte March for Life. When I was sitting in my parish office and I received a call asking if I would be interested to deliver some remarks at the March for Life, I said, "You're scraping the bottom of the barrel." And they said, "Yes, we already called 14 people," and they said no. So I grew in humility very quickly at that moment. Not the response I expected on the phone, but there we go. But to be fair, to prepare remarks for a march such as this is a difficult task because really the speaker's always preaching to the choir. You're here, you showed up, you believe in the sanctity of life, and you are praying for the end of abortion in our country. So I don't have to convince you that life is precious from the moment of conception until natural death. And so this year I want to trace a brief history about how we got to this moment in our country, to describe the presence or the crisis that we face in the present day, and then finally propose a couple of suggestions as we renew our resolve to continue to fight for the end of abortion within our country. At the time of colonial America, the legality of abortion followed English common law. This meant that abortion was illegal after fetal movements could be detected. So this was generally considered about 15 to 20 weeks after conception. And in the 1820s, abortion became illegal in the United Kingdom, and many states in America followed suit. Interestingly enough, laws to ban abortion were motivated mainly in the United States by physicians who were encouraged more and more by modern medical science that showed a continuous development of a fetus from conception until birth. And so it was really an established fact at the beginning of our country, and medically established and held to be true, that conception was the inception of a human life. These two concepts are important: conception and inception, two realities that went hand in hand. The word conception coming from the Latin, the prefix con meaning together with, and capere meaning to take. Together, conception literally means at its root to take with or to hold with. In terms of human life, conception means the mother is taking in or holding within herself another person. Now, I may be considered outdated or not woke when I say that I believe that words communicate truth and reality. But this was the view in the 19th century world too. When both doctors and parents used the word conception and said we have conceived a child, it meant we have taken in and hold within ourselves a new person. It is the inception then of a new life. And if we look at the etymology of that word, it means usually to begin an undertaking or layer something within something else. New life is not just about the moment of conception, but to begin something that has a future, something that will continue with proper care and nurturing. It is also a layering of a new life within an already existing life. In the 19th century, there was really no opposition to the reality that human life in the womb had dignity and had worth. This was supported by the culture of the time in our country and by the medical field. Moreover, the modern iteration of the Hippocratic Oath was taking effect throughout the Western world, and that was considered absolute. This is not to say that abortion was non-existent, but it did mean that medical professionals were not the ones performing abortions. Abortions were executed, and I use that word deliberately, were executed and performed by those who were untrained in the medical field and not connected to healthcare institutions like clinics or hospitals. But there was a drawback, though. With the advance of medical sciences, there developed a more precise understanding of prenatal chemicals and prenatal health. From this advancement came the advent of more precise and effective abortifacient medicines and consumables. This was also a response to the fact that by the 1900s, abortion was a felony in every state in the United States. So it was much easier to take care of an unwanted pregnancy through a pill or some other way, since procured abortion was illegal. The turn of the 20th century brought about a revolutionary change in the American perspective regarding abortion. Margaret Sanger founded the American Birth Control League in 1921, which became the Planned Parenthood Federation of America in 1942. Any student of history, true history, through the studying of primary sources and not the revisionist history of secular education and modern government-sponsored curricula, any honest student of history will find that Margaret Sanger's philosophy at the foundation of Planned Parenthood was racist and dysmorphophobic. Her writings and speeches clearly show that she only wanted white, healthy babies born in families without any hint of economic hardship or uncertainty. If there was any sign of deformity in the child, that warranted a termination of pregnancy. If the family dynamics did not fit her bill of eugenics, that warranted a termination of pregnancy. I begin here because the pro-life movement focuses so much on Roe versus Wade that we can forget to counter the cultural shift that developed prior to that pivotal case and continues to pervade our society. We can forget or not even be aware of the mindset that was disseminated before the 1970s in America, which said that some children are wanted and some children are unwanted. If a child is unwanted, his or her life was somehow less than a wanted child, because its life would be one of greater difficulty and trial. I am not aware, however, of any guarantee that one has a right to a life only if it has no suffering or distress. There's no guarantee that said one has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness only without having to overcome difficulties and obstacles. No, we here know that the right to life is absolute in and of itself. It means that the child has a right to be brought to term, delivered, and then cared for lovingly. But herein lies the rub. In the early 20th century and coming to the forefront of the 1950s, there was a movement gathering steam to allow abortions when the life of the mother was in danger. As intelligent people, we can recognize and accept that there are situations in which the mother must receive medical care that will endanger the life of her unborn child, or even cause the foreseeable death of her child. But it's good to keep in mind those situations are extremely rare, and yet they are flaunted as the way to get at pro-life advocates in the arguments for life. This definition of health of the mother began to expand and evolve based on the undercurrents of Margaret Sanger's philosophy. A child, the pro-choice advocates would say, should not be brought into this world if it will endanger the life of the mother. But what does that mean? What does the phrase life of the mother? It used to mean the extremely rare situation in which a medically unsound pregnancy placed the mother's life in near danger of death. It evolved, however, to mean that the child would place an undue burden on the mother's life. Therefore, life no longer meant the objective criterion of existing, but the quality of status and advancement in material gain of the mother. This is the underpinning of the majority of social and personal arguments for abortion, and these were present long before Roe v. Wade and the current societal epidemic of irrational individualism. If the mother will not be able to go to college, make the desired amount of money she wants to make, or even have the same comfort she hoped for, this was considered a danger to the life of the mother, but it was the qualitative life of the mother. Therefore, the child must go. Since Roe v. Wade, the pro-life struggle has been a grassroots movement that has sought to unify as many voices as possible to convince legislators to enact laws that protect the sanctity of human life and overturn the judicial decision which legalized abortion in all 50 states. It is also a struggle at the doors of abortion mills. Countless numbers of decent human beings who have been given the gift of life gather, pray, and counsel on the sidewalks outside of abortion facilities throughout the country. An innumerable collection of men and women have been hauled off in handcuffs over the last 50 years simply for trying to bring a message of hope and support to women who have been told that there is no other option but to eradicate the life of their child. And we must also acknowledge the brave women who have healed from their own abortions and men who have found redemption after supporting, encouraging, or remained silent as their child's mother went through such a horrific tragedy. A great number of them speak up regularly, attempting to dissuade expectant mothers and cooperative fathers from making the same mistake. But we must not delude ourselves into thinking that the undercurrents of a materialistic and prosperous society have not driven this push for the continued legalization of abortion in our country. We are currently standing at a precipice in American history. We have allowed for too long the mentality that life should be without difficulty and suffering. We have fooled ourselves into making comfort and therapeutics our goal. For those with common sense, however, which as G.K. Chesterton once cleverly pointed out, is not so common anymore, our current global epidemic reminds us that the effects of the fall are inescapable. Human life indeed is more than quality and length, but something to be valued in itself. Human life at the moment of conception is about relationship. No matter the situation of the family or the circumstances of the conception, human life, even in the womb, produces irrevocable relationships that define and undergird its sanctity. First and foremost, there is a relationship of the child with God, who is seen to its formation. Secondly is the relationship between the child and its mother, a relationship of caring and nurturing, a relationship of guardianship and responsibility. These relationships go beyond biology and science. These relationships foreshadow the future connections and associations between that child and those he or she will meet throughout its life. But some will say that certain lives have less value because of social circumstances or some foreseeable illness or complication that would hinder the formation of relationships. A brother priest once told me his story of setting out during Holy Week because he wanted to do mission work in another country. He sought out a place where true need for a priest was present. And so he went to an orphanage run by the Missionaries of Charity in, if I can recall, a country in Eastern Europe. There the sisters cared for the children who were unwanted, because when the Iron Curtain fell and communism was vanquished, Mother Teresa and her sisters went in to help clean up the spiritual wasteland that socialism caused. The children that the sisters cared for were deformed, sickly, and many incoherent as they made signs and noises trying to communicate. The sisters, however, saw the value of life. As this priest prepared to celebrate the Triduum liturgies with the sisters in the convent, he was surprised that they had gathered the children for Holy Thursday Mass. Throughout the whole Mass, the children made noises and were horribly distracting. Even the sisters bustled about during Mass to tend to the children, but when it came time for the consecration, the children fell silent. The sisters had taught them about the Holy Eucharist. For the moments that the sacred host was elevated for adoration, they adored. In the end, these unwanted children showed that they could form new relationships. Yes, there was the relationship of the caring and loving sisters toward the children, but that relationship formed through catechesis and education, a relation of the children with their sacramental God. My friends, our work in the pro-life movement is to show forth the powerful reality that human life is valuable beyond socioeconomic situations. It is valuable beyond quality and means. The value of human life is about forming bonds of love and caring. And that is what makes our work and advocacy so important in our country today. We stand, I repeat, at a precipice. Rather than forming unifying relationships of love and caring, our country is divided. I don't mean to expose every facet of these divisions, but I do mean to speak to the situation we find ourselves in. It is a position of our postmodern world where everyone reacts rather than responds. It's a time of cancel culture where every disagreeable voice is shut out and shut down. It is a time in which we raise our voice to fight for the unborn. And we can be canceled, we can be silenced, and we can be mocked, but do not despair. This only means that our country right now is a proving ground for the principled voices of reason and truth. It is a time for your voices to be heard despite any opposition. At this point, I have to be careful about my rhetoric because if I mention the word march or demonstration, I might be accused of inciting violence and I'll get kicked off of Facebook. But we cannot let this plight of intimidation keep us from being bold. For too long we have allowed the official pro-life groups to brand our message. It is time we seek a renewal in our convictions. And I hope I do not cause too much controversy with my following remarks. It is no longer enough to hold up signs that say abortion hurts women and abortion stops a beating heart. With the trash that the majority of Americans watch on TV, pictures of aborted babies are ignored by the masses during marches and demonstrations. On a cultural level, I even now question the effectiveness of youth groups marching in Washington while chanting their slogans back and forth. Yes, the numbers are strong and demonstrate a continuous growth of pro-life cause. I also do not mean to dissuade these practices which have converted the hearts and minds of many. But are we as pro-lifers able to engage intelligently in daily discourse that changes the fabric of our society? That is where the change and renewal need to take place. Not only do the abortion laws need to be changed, but we must also weave our pro-life message into a movement that changes the heart of our country. If we only work toward legal changes, then stronger and better marketing tactics can hinder the changes we seek. This is in fact precisely the shrewd marketing and cleverness of pro-abortion advocates that got us to where we are today. So I would like to propose just a couple of suggestions. First and foremost, we must be actively engaging our neighbors. I have repeated for many years that politics is a derivative of our values and our culture. We must invest ourselves in our local communities, in our neighborhoods, in our local governments, in order to show those who have the power to change the course of our country that the pro-life movement is founded upon love, and that acknowledgement of the goodness and sanctity of unborn life is beneficial to the common good. Marches and demonstrations only go so far. In fact, since Roe v. Wade, we have seen presidents go back and forth with executive orders and unilateral decisions regarding abortions, taxpayer funding, limits on procedures, and even taxpayer support for abortion abroad. Our voice on the national and state level is heard at least yearly, but our work as pro-lifers is not finished here in Charlotte today, or tomorrow in Raleigh, or in 2 weeks' time in Washington, D.C. Our work is drawing others into the ability to demand from state and federal legislators that they respect human life by enacting laws that protect the unborn, and if they don't, they must be voted out. The least effective way to ensure this is by waving political signs and posting who we're voting for on social media. Instead, it must begin in our community and with our neighbors. It begins by forming relationships that are based upon the question, how can we reflect in our community, township, neighborhood, the values that we hold dear as Americans? If we are all on our own and not engaging with those who live around us, we don't think much about enshrining values. Instead, we simply worry about what's going to get me ahead and secure my own comfort. My second proposal is one that is challenging but rewarding. The pro-life movement must be explicitly ecumenical and interreligious. When we march, when we stand outside of abortion mills, and when we engage our local communities, we are not Catholic, Methodist, Orthodox, Jewish, Lutheran, atheist, Mormon, or Buddhist. We are human beings seeking to save human beings. Since I'm Catholic, I'll pick on Catholics. Too often we shy away from the other churches who organize events, gatherings, and walks. Why? The response comes back, we want to be the silent witness. Just leave us alone and let us pray our rosaries. Don't get me wrong, the rosary is a powerful and great spiritual weapon in the fight against abortion. But then we are accepted for how we present ourselves. The other churches look at the Catholics and say, they just want to be left alone and pray in their own way, and so we'll gather over here and pray our way. Instead, we must be taken out of our comfort zone. The pro-life movement is an all-humans movement. Mary will not be disappointed if you pray 4 decades instead of 5 in order to stop and sing a Christian song with some non-Catholics. And God won't be disappointed when we invite the non-Catholics to stand and pray in silence with those funny Catholics holding on to their string of beads. I was once separated from my group at the National March for Life when I was a seminarian, and I was with a classmate. We stepped out of the street to the sidewalk, and we looked for the red and white striped hats everyone in our group was wearing. Thinking we walked ahead of them, we must have stood there for 15 minutes, and eventually I said, we've just got to keep walking, we'll find them at the end. So I took a step into the crowd that was moving toward the Supreme Court building. And there was a group at that moment that was passing by. It was a Protestant church group alternating between singing praise songs and their youth pastor reading scripture and praying extemporaneously. My classmate grabbed my arm, pulled me back, and said, let's wait for a Catholic group to walk with. I'm not comfortable with their style of prayer. I looked at him and said, you know what else is uncomfortable? Abortion. We are making that known, and so are they. We're just speaking different languages, and if we join them, it will be an immersion experience. So we marched with that group, and we really met some fantastic people. Can we share communion with them at the altar? No. But we shared the communion of prayer and praise as we walked together that day. We must be willing to recognize that one faith group's efforts are not enough alone to win this war. If there is any movement that people of all faiths and creeds should be able to agree on and work together to promote, it is the sanctity of life and the end of abortion in our land. Lastly, we must always educate ourselves holistically. I emphasize education because the pro-abortion argument is inherently illogical, or in some cases, pro-choice advocates have done no thinking about it at all. It all boils down to the question, does human life have intrinsic value? If so, the taking of an innocent life inside or outside the womb is wrong and evil. But the pro-life movement goes far beyond that awful reality of prenatal infanticide. If we are honest about the historical change in opinion on abortion in our country, it traces all the way back to the separation between the gift of human sexuality and God's purpose for marriage and the human family. It is no coincidence that the fight for abortion went hand in hand with the movement to separate the genital expression of sexuality from marriage. This gave rise to premarital sex, adultery, fornication. Marital intimacy dropped the word marital, and in our society has become recreational. So there had to be a means to prevent these unwanted consequences of sexual activity. Hence the rise in the market for contraceptives, birth control, and abortive fashions. When those fail, abortion is the result. So what does this education look like? It looks like self-mastery and virtue. It is those who profess that life is sacred from the moment of conception until natural death, and then treat everyone they encounter as sacred and valuable. It means homes in which children experience their parents treating each other with value and dignity. It means entertainment and recreation that does not contradict the worth of the human person. It means a rejection of the secular message that we should love things and use people to get what we want. It means going out of our way and out of our comfort zone to help the needy and support the poor in our community because all life is sacred. It means being honest about our selfishness and seeking God's forgiveness for the times that I chose my own interests over the good of my neighbor. In the end, my message is this. We must break the stereotypes, structures, and programming that up until now we have clung to. We each must live a new pro-life movement that can confront not only the evil of abortion, but also the evil of division, where everyone does their own thing in their own silos. We must stand united with a voice that is courageous, bold, and unrelenting. It is the work of the pro-life movement that culminates not only in marches and gatherings, but consists of living out daily the values that used to be in our country self-evident, that every person has a right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. But that pursuit cannot have fruit unless we walk hand in hand with our neighbors. No matter his creed, skin color, or life experience, we all have an obligation to band together to cry out that abortion is division par excellence. It is the division of the body parts of a child in the womb. It is a division of a child from its mother. It is a division of family life. It is a division of relationships that are sacred. It divides the virtue of hope from our thoughts of the future. So our response must be one that is unifying, bold, and new. Thank you for your boldness and courage today as you march and pray together in unison. Thank you for the opportunity to offer these remarks. May God bless and reward each of you for standing for life, and let us never miss an opportunity, not only to proclaim, but to live out the reality that every life is sacred.